Picture this, the Vatican, 2025. The whole world is watching, holding its breath, really. All eyes are glued to the Sistine Chapel, and everyone, well, nearly everyone, thought they knew who the next pope would be, Cardinal Tagle, the beloved Asian Francis.
That was certainly the prevailing mood. Huge expectation.
But then, well, the unexpected. The smoke changes color, white smoke rises, but the name announced sends ripples of surprise, maybe even shock, around the globe.
It really did. What unfolded wasn't just a surprise election, you see. It became this incredible story about faith, about a kind of hidden friendship, and about a very different style of leadership.
Exactly. And that's what we want to dive into for you today, what really happened inside those walls and what it tells us about the church, maybe, right now.
The build-up to that 2025 conclave was intense, wasn't it? And so much of it centered on Cardinal Tagle.
Oh, completely. He wasn't just one of the frontrunners. He was seen almost universally as the expected one.
People connected with him. That image of a shepherd with a father's heart, you know? A serious theologian, but someone who could communicate with the warmth of a storyteller.
And that humility everyone talked about, coupled with a real global perspective. He represented the global South in a powerful way.
His qualities were undeniable. Gentleness, yes, but also a real pastoral depth. A passion for the gospel that just seemed to radiate beyond borders.
He had already held a significant role, too, as prefect for the evangelization of peoples.
Right, a key position. And his time there was marked by, I think, genuine sincerity and this deep empathy for the global church. It really came through.
So it wasn't just media hype. There was this almost an unspoken certainty spreading among journalists, bishops, even some cardinals, apparently.
Yes, his name topped virtually every list, the papabile lists, as they call them. He looked like the natural successor.
But a conclave, it's different, isn't it? It operates under, well, different rules.
Entirely different. Inside the Sistine Chapel, the cardinals are gathered for prayer, for deliberation. Silence plays a huge part. It's meant to be guided by something other than popular opinion.
And the contrast must have been striking. Outside, you have the 24/7 news cycle, the pilgrims in the square, everyone geared up for that specific story Tagle, the first Asian pope.
Exactly. The world was ready for one narrative, but inside, human expectation starts to yield to something else. And then on the second day, the white smoke appears, the Fumata Bianca.
Election complete. But for most people watching, that smoke didn't bring the expected confirmation. It brought confusion, shock.
Shock is probably the right word for many. The name announced wasn't Tagle, it was Robert Francis Prevost.
And that name, for the wider public at least, came out of left field.
It did. Headlines immediately labeled it a surprise, a complete mystery, him the dark horse. Cardinal Prevost, while highly respected within the Vatican system.
Okay, let's talk about that. He wasn't unknown inside.
Not at all. He headed the very influential dicastery for bishops, the office recommending bishops worldwide. That requires immense trust, discretion, deep knowledge, and he had decades of missionary experience in Peru, an Augustinian background. Very solid credentials.
But not a media figure, not someone cultivating a public profile on the run-up.
No, quite the opposite, almost absent from those public speculation lists. And some suggested afterwards that this very lack of external spotlight might have allowed space for the Spirit to move more freely, perhaps. Less political pressure.
An interesting thought. So the support for him grew quietly inside the chapel.
That's the picture painted. Steadily, unexpectedly, during the ballots. Cardinals who were there described it less as strategy and more as a kind of sacred movement. The mysterious work of the Holy Spirit, they'd say, acting through this figure of quiet humility. He reached the 2/3 majority needed.
So while the world is processing this massive surprise, what was happening with Cardinal Tagle inside the Sistine Chapel at that moment?
And this is where the story takes such a deeply moving turn. People who saw it, who were there when Prevost's name became decisive, they noticed something remarkable about Tagle.
Which was?
He didn't flinch. There wasn't a flicker of disappointment on his face. Instead, observers described seeing peace, a profound sense of peace.
Like a silent prayer, almost. Seeing it not as a personal loss, but as a sacred burden being accepted by his brother cardinal.
Precisely that. Reports are very consistent here. Tagle had never actively sought the papacy. He was known for deflecting that kind of speculation, often with real humility.
Right, he saw it as a cross, not a prize.
Exactly. Not a prize to be won, but a cross to be embraced. That was his perspective. So if that cross was given to another, his role was simply to support, to pray.
So, in a way, he hadn't lost anything because he wasn't actually seeking it in the first place.
That seems to be the core of it. His immediate internal reaction was apparently one of thanksgiving, a powerful contrast to the whole external narrative of winners and losers.
Okay, so the conclave ends, the announcement is made. The days that followed must have been a whirlwind.
Absolutely. Ceremonies, the media frenzy, intense speculation. And then Pope Leo XIV, as Prevost chose to be called, steps out onto the balcony.
And what was the impression he made?
Quiet strength, deep reverence. His first words weren't grand pronouncements. They were simple, human, prayerful.
And perhaps in those initial moments, people started to see why he might have been chosen, beyond just the surprise.
I think so. The narrative began to shift slightly, at least for those looking closely, less about the dark horse or why Tegel wasn't chosen, and more about sensing maybe providence at work rather than just Vatican politics.
And part of what came into focus then was something not widely known outside, right?
Exactly. This deep pre-existing friendship between Tegel and Prevost, now Pope Leo XIV.
It wasn't just a conclave acquaintance.
Not at all. This bond had grown over years in Rome, not through big official meetings, but described more as quiet coffees, moments of shared trust, building that connection away from the spotlight.
They'd worked in parallel in the Curia.
Yes. Tegel focusing on global evangelization, Prevost on the crucial task of identifying bishops, different areas, but a shared sense of mission, serving the church with faithfulness, with joy. And apparently, Pope Leo felt a profound need for Tegel's support.
He wanted him close.
Very much so. As a companion, a guide, a brother, a witness on this incredibly daunting journey he was starting.
Which led to that private meeting soon after the election. Away from everything.
Yes, a simple request. They met. And the accounts described just an embrace at first. Words weren't immediately necessary.
What do they talk about?
Gentler, unhurriedly. Reflections on the conclave, yes, but also shared memories, theological thoughts. Tegel apparently mentioned sensing the spirit in Leo's quiet way of listening during the deliberations.
And then that very personal exchange.
Tegel's quiet admission. I prayed for you. And Leo's response, equally simple but profound. I know, I felt it.
Wow. That speaks volumes about their connection.
It really does. They even apparently recalled small, everyday things, morning coffees, dropping notes before giving a homily, the kind of human moments that kept them grounded amidst all the Vatican formality.
And then Leo's request.
Deeply felt, it seems, something like, I don't know what I'll do yet. I need your heart beside mine, vulnerable, honest.
When Amble's response.
Tearful acceptance, reportedly. Then I will walk with you.
It's incredibly moving. And there was a gift exchange, too.
Yes. Pope Leo gave Tegel a simple wooden cross from his own missionary days in Peru, and the words that came with it, not because you didn't become pope, but because you never needed to.
A powerful symbol, underscoring that idea that greatness isn't about wearing the crown, but maybe about helping to lift the cross alongside the one who does.
Exactly. It set the tone for their relationship going forward.
So how did this unexpected Pope, Leo XIV, actually begin to lead? What marked his style early on?
Two things really stand out. That quiet strength we mentioned, and what seemed like a radical commitment to listening. He didn't seem to crave the spotlight.
A shepherd leading by listening.
That's a good way to put it. Cardinal Tegel himself observed something similar, saying, Pope Leo leads like Christ did, not shouting from rooftops, but walking beside the people.
How did that translate into practice?
You hear reports of his patience in meetings, taking real time for reflection before making decisions, apparently taking important reports to prayer literally before the tabernacle, and this expressed desire to visit the peripheries, the wounded parts of the world.
Tegel saw that as wisdom, not weakness.
Yes, discernment. He apparently said silence is not absence when people commented on the Pope's reflective pace.
And that connects back to his time in Peru, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Decades as a missionary, often in remote areas. Ministry there wasn't about issuing directives from afar. It was built entirely on relationships, on truly hearing the needs, the faith, the unspoken cries of people.
So listening wasn't just a tactic for him. It was fundamental.
It seems deeply ingrained. And this approach, this emphasis on pause, reflection, attentive listening, it began to subtly shift the culture, encouraging that same posture elsewhere in the church.
Then came the installation mass, and another incredibly symbolic moment involving both men. Tegel placing the fisherman's ring on Leo's finger.
A moment just steeped in history and meaning. That ring, the seal of Peter, isn't just jewelry. It symbolizes the Pope's authority and his mission to gather, love, and serve the flock.
Millions were watching around the world. The solemnity must have been palpable.
Immense, but you also have this intensely personal layer for Tegal and Leo. It's a sacred trust being passed, but passed in grace, not rivalry. Tegal holds out the ring, Leo extends his hand.
Tegal slides it on, their eyes meet.
Exactly. And while we couldn't hear the words, accounts suggest a whispered exchange. Tegal offering a blessing, perhaps something like, "I believe in you," and Leo's quiet, "Thank you, brother," with reports of tears in Tegal's eyes at that moment.
More than just a ceremony, then.
Much more. It felt like a consecration of their shared path, a public statement about their bond. As someone observed, it wasn't just the start of a papacy, but the continuation of a friendship sanctified by the Spirit.
And Pope Leo himself acknowledged that later.
He did, publicly highlighting Tegal's role in that moment, saying, "Tegal placed not only a ring on my finger, but love in my heart."
That focus on love and heart seems crucial. It apparently guided his focus towards a different kind of papal journey, too.
Yes, very much so. He felt this strong pull towards places of suffering, reportedly deeply affected by encounters like meeting a teacher from war-torn Aleppo who asked that heartbreaking question, "Is God still listening?"
So a shift away from traditional state visits.
Towards something described as quiet pilgrimages of solidarity, less protocol, more presence.
And the first destination set the tone.
A refugee camp. No motorcades and red carpets, just arriving quietly, kneeling beside injured people, listening to mothers who'd lost children, sitting with barefoot kids. Direct human encounter.
And Tegal was involved in planning these.
Often, the quiet architect, using his own deep knowledge and empathy for the suffering church to help shape these journeys, identifying places and situations where the Pope's presence could mean the most.
The impact must have been profound.
Immense by all accounts. Here was a pope who wasn't just speaking about the wounded, he was walking with them. Getting the smell of the sheep, as Pope Francis used to say, crying with them. It offered a kind of healing that policies alone can't provide.
Tegal's reflection on that was quite striking.
It was, contrasting the image of popes seen mainly from balconies with Pope Leo, who steps off the balcony and into the dusk with the people.
And there was that conversation they had in the Vatican gardens.
Yes, reflecting on Christ carrying the world's wounds in forgotten places, and Leo expressing this deep desire to spend his pontificate walking with the wounded. That seemed to be his core mission.
It also seems Pope Leo's background American, yes, but with this deep Peruvian missionary experience positioned him uniquely.
It gave him a kind of bridge-building capacity, didn't it? Able to connect with different cultures, understand different perspectives in a church that's becoming ever more multicultural, multilingual, multipolar.
And this wasn't seen as a rejection of his predecessor, Pope Francis.
No, more of a sacred continuation, a harmony. You had the Jesuit emphasis of Francis, now interwoven with the Augustinian charism of Leo that focus on community, the interior life, the search for truth.
Tegal had a great analogy for that.
He did. We are not watching a new melody replace the old. We are hearing two melodies played together, two voices, one harmony. A beautiful image.
And this harmony played out in practical ways, too.
Yes, things like the Church of the Two Hemispheres initiative, again with Tegal involved, setting up listening assemblies in dioceses often overlooked far from Rome, giving voice to the peripheries.
And the story with the farmers in Laos?
Powerful, isn't it? Hearing they were praying for him and Pope Leo's immediate response. They are Peter. Not just subjects of Peter, but embodying the rock of faith themselves.
Recognizing the faith of ordinary people as foundational.
Exactly. He kept returning to that theme, like in a general audience talk, stressing the gospel's universality, how it's found most purely in the faces of the poor, not confined by borders or power structures.
There was also talk of a particular homily he gave early on, one that really resonated, maybe even reset expectations.
Yes, a pivotal moment. Whether it was the installation or another major mass soon after, the description is vivid. Chose a simple vestment, set aside his prepared text, held just a wooden crucifix.
In the theme.
The church's own wounds, he didn't shy away from it, abuse, divisions, clericalism, the drift of young people, but always linking it to the call to be witnesses of resurrection through those wounds.
Not condemning, but honest.
Direct, honest, but not scolding, naming truths. Things like fearing the loss of influence more than the loss of souls. Speaking more about rules than about Christ. The danger of the church becoming a museum if the youth aren't there. Bishops fearing loss of credibility. Reminding everyone that the world's woundedness isn't something against the church. It is the church in many ways.
And he illustrated it physically too, didn't he?
Yes. Stepping down during communion, bringing the Eucharist personally to a homeless man, a child with autism, some migrant workers nearby, a powerful living image of his message.
What was the reaction?
Deep silence, apparently, a sense of holy trembling, a feeling that this wasn't just a speech, it was prophetic. The reflection afterwards within the Vatican was something like, he's the shepherd we didn't expect, but maybe he's the one God has waited for.
So looking back over that first year or so, what are the enduring themes of Pope Leo XIV's pontificate?
Prayer central, that habit of deep prayer, discernment, that consistent pattern of listening before acting, and authenticity, just being real.
There was mention of a private letter.
Yes, one he wrote not for the press or archives, but addressed simply to God's people, placed quietly in the Chapel of Tears, a personal offering.
And through it all, that friendship with Tegel remained an anchor.
Absolutely. Those moments like the early morning coffee where he could apparently just be Robert again,
Mhm.
finding that essential human connection amidst the immense pressures of the papacy.
That sounds vital. And the visit with that small, diverse group.
Yes, bringing together people who had profoundly touched him in that first year, the homeless man, the Syrian mother, the indigenous catechist, a teenager, a nun, listening to their stories, and his response.
Which was?
Simple, humble, you have taught me how to be Pope, and more importantly, how to be Christian.
Tegel's assessment seems fitting then. That history might remember Leo not for grand projects, but for his presence, his authenticity.
And that silence that spoke louder than words, ultimately the way he lived, rooted in prayer and service, that became his most eloquent homily.
It's quite a story, isn't it? How the narrative everyone expected, this charismatic figure rising, morphed into something completely different. A quieter witness, this unexpected deep friendship taking center stage, and a shepherd leading by listening, by presence.
It makes you think. Perhaps the church didn't get the leader the world predicted, or maybe even the leader it thought it wanted. But maybe, just maybe, it got the leader it truly needed for this moment.
And that leaves a fascinating question for you, listening now. In a world that prizes noise, predictions, the spotlight, where do you find the deepest truth? Is it always where the cameras are pointed? Or could it be waiting in the quiet, unexpected people and places? Definitely something to reflect on.